That's right. Today, someone very kindly, they didn't want to be named, so I won't name them, has sent me a list and said, Simon, I think these are a bunch of matches where the wrong person lost at WrestleMania, or won at WrestleMania. Basically, we got the wrong winner here. Can you talk about them and let me know your opinion? I was like, you're damn right I can. We're not going to do this in any particular order because I think it's more fun you going, I didn't see that coming. But we are going back to WrestleMania 32 for the first one, which is AJ Styles versus Chris Jericho. Now, I don't want to be that guy. I totally forgot this match had happened and I had to go back and watch it. And of course, it's when we did the fake tag team for like 3.7 days. And somehow within that period, they still released that shirt, whatever it's called, AJ Jericho Fun Times in Your Pants. And people actually bought it. Now, one day, maybe that shirt is going to be worth something because I can't believe they produced many. But yes, they actually had Chris Jericho win. Now, Chris Jericho has had the short straw sometimes at WrestleMania. He himself has talked about this, and I do agree. But I think back at WrestleMania 32, which now is almost a decade ago, this is when WWE was still kind of establishing AJ Styles as a WWE guy, for lack of a better term. And look, he did it anyway because he went on to have a bunch of World Championship wins, and he's one of the best of all time. But it seems absolutely mad to me that you would do that at that period because Chris Jericho was just more of a cemented figure within the structure of the WWE, whereas once again, AJ, he'd already won everybody over because that's just what he does. I think he won over when he came out of the Royal Rumble 2016. But yeah, I just think the problem with this match is it doesn't really matter who won or lost, which is a terrible thing to say. But the build was weird, and it kind of made me feel, again, especially when I went back to watch it, it was two dudes, and they probably wanted to work with each other for obvious reasons, but it didn't really have a plan after this. There wasn't a massive plan going into it, which is why we had the whole hoopla. And then one day Vince McMahon probably wouldn't want to give it to Jericho, because Jericho's been here longest, and it all just felt a bit meh, which makes me a massive asshole, and I'm sorry. There's also the fact that the next night, I believe it was, or at some point in the next week, AJ would become the number one contender to take on Roman Reigns. Now look, I don't think I'd be a very good booker, but even though I know that's stupid. We move on to WrestleMania 34 after this, another match that I totally forgot happened, so I had to go and boot it up again. Randy Orton versus Bobby Roode versus Rusev versus Jinder Mahal for the United States Championship. This is another one where surely we just looked around and said, well, we have to get all these people on the card. What will we do? So we threw them in here. And now listen, I got no problem with Jinder Mahal winning. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. And that's not true, I do, because we're about to talk about it. But it was not his fault. The WWE kept putting him in these positions. If I turn up to work tomorrow and it's only day 2 and someone says, Simon, do you want to be the manager of the company? You're not going to say no. Like, ultimately, it's probably going to be a bad idea because you don't have the experience, but you only don't shoot the shots you don't shoot. That's not what it is at all. But you say yes to opportunities and then you figure it out afterwards. Now, the point about WrestleMania 34, WrestleMania established, not WrestleMania. Randy Orton established. Bobby Roode was always in this kind of sort of weird back and forth period on the main roster. But Rusev was having Rusev Day at this point, and anyone with their brain could have gone, this is the time to capitalize on that. Nobody else in this match matters, which is one of the reasons we probably put Rusev in there. But just to tell you the worst story ever, in case you haven't seen a video about this before, Vince McMahon thought the fans were taking the mick out of Rusev Day, but out was Rusev by saying Rusev Day, so he was never going to push it properly, even though he organically got over. Once again, if you have seen any of my content, you know I'm a massive Miro Rusev fan, and all of this was absolutely gibberish. Sometimes just do the obvious thing. I keep saying this. You do it because it's obvious. You also then could have told people, oh, hi, Rusev is a main event babyface now, or at least a babyface. He was kind of a tweener at this point. Surprise, surprise. Do you know how long Jinder held this title? It was like a week and a half. I don't know why we do this, and my eyes have closed. Go back to WrestleMania 31 after this, the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Kind of crazy. This was 9 years ago. But this is when everything awesome was going down with The Miz and Damien Sandow. And everybody presumed, oh, the stunt dumber thing is really funny. We can actually do something with Sandow here. He can win the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. And look, he did throw out The Miz to a mega pop. And then Damien got thrown out right afterwards. And even when I watched it recently, all the crowd just go, ugh. You popped the bubble. That's not the point of WrestleMania. It was the Big Show that got the win as well, and he stood next to the Andre the Giant trophy just so commentators could go, wow, Andre was a giant, and so is this guy. And look, this is no fault of the Big Shows, but he wasn't really doing much of anything at this stage, whereas if we'd actually gone all in with Damien Mizdow, Sandow, who the flub knows where he would have been now? And instead we turned him into Macho Man, and then we fired him. All this was wild. Now the next one is quite interesting. It's The Miz and John Cena from WrestleMania 27. And I do understand this. Like, this was not The Miz's fault, but he was trying to contend with John Cena and The Rock. Don't forget, that's how he retained his championship here, because The Rock just attacked John Cena. I was like, Matt, I don't care. And this was also the match where The Miz got knocked out. If you watch that bump today, when he goes over Barry Barricade and smacks his head on the concrete, it is absolutely horrific. And how he didn't have more than just a concussion is beyond me. If you told me he'd broken his brain and his skull, I actually would have believed you. But I do actually like the fact that Miz won at WrestleMania 27, because I think he's always been an underrated talent and someone that doesn't actually get the respect he deserves. You don't fluke your way into the kind of career that he has had. You have to have the work ethic, you have to have the talent, you have to have the skill. But it is kind of hard to argue that given what the company wanted to do, I think it was one of these equations, or one of these situations, I should say, where I think WWE knew that John Cena was going to win. The ha-ha wouldn't be funny if we just let The Miz keep it. And the problem with this is that leading into this, he hadn't felt like the top guy, and coming out of it, he hadn't felt like the top guy, and then John Cena just beat him for it anyway, so we could start building to next year's WrestleMania, which was The Rock and John Cena. And of course, that was set up 24 hours later on Raw, so once again, Miz, the champion, was pushed into the corner like he was absolutely nothing. So I think given what WWE was trying to do, John Cena probably should have won, but in the personal world of Simon Miller, I secretly like this one, because like The Miz flipping everybody off, once again, it's that word, that phrase, he deserved it. We're going to go all the way back to WrestleMania 7 now, where it was Ultimate Warrior taking on Randy Savage. Now, if you don't remember this one, because you may not be an old school fan, it was a retirement match for Randy Savage, right? That was the big old deal. If the Ultimate Warrior was going to beat him, the Macho Man was going to have to walk away. As you now know, this was one of those stipulations that we did not adhere to. But kind of crazily, we went with the Ultimate Warrior. Now, this kind of ties into the love-hate relationship that Vince McMahon and WWE and WWF had with one then Jim Hell, where he would come back, he would be so over, everybody like, oh man, we've got to go all the way with this guy, which we did eventually when he beat Hulk Hogan at that WrestleMania. It didn't really work out as intended. But even when he would go up against, I would say, more prominent WWF figures, I mean, the Macho Man was kind of more established when the Ultimate Warrior came in and just blew everything up. We just kept going back to the Ultimate Warrior. And this kind of does make sense in many ways, because he was this bucket of emotion. It was like lightning in a cup, whatever you want to call it. Who gets lightning in a cup? That would be terrifying. But I think given that the stipulation about Randy Savage leaving was just there to try and add faux emotion to the wrestling match, I mean, it did work. And if you want to say this is one of the Ultimate Warrior's better matches, I would totally be behind you. It's actually pretty damn good. But I think given what we know now, and hindsight is a powerful tool, giving it to the Macho Man probably would have made more sense. But it did tie into the Savage run in the WWF. Obviously, he won the championship at WrestleMania 4 and then went on to lose it at WrestleMania 5 to Hulk Hogan. But he was always playing second fiddle to Hulk Hogan. And I don't know whether I just understood this when I was a kid, because I would always root for the underdogs. I love the Macho Man Randy Savage so much. And whenever he did finally get his due, I would just do the dance of joy. So I could be being biased here. And over the years, yes, my opinion of the Ultimate Warrior has changed based on events and things that he has said. But I don't know. I mean, the ending is pretty good because people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Randy Savage is walking away. But now that I know that's baloney, we should have gone the other way. We'll do a recent one, but a goodie here as we go to WrestleMania 34 and Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns. This is obviously the pay-per-view premium live event. Were they premium live events there? Maybe they weren't. When Brock did win and just hurled the title at Vince McMahon when he was walking back to backstage, because all of this was a massive farce. If you do not know, the big dog version of Roman Reigns, or the original babyface version of Roman Reigns, was not working. Now, WWE was kind of torn here because they still wanted to make him the guy. Vince had decided, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to push. I'm going to push. But then they would always get cold feet at the last second. This being the case in point. If you want to coronate Roman Reigns and you want to make him the good guy of all good guys, just do it. Put a damn crown on his head. Nobody's going to care because we expect it anyway. And even though you may get some boos, we've come to terms with it. But instead what we did is all the plans were changed and we gave it to Brock Lesnar to go, see, we are listening to you. And then we just gave it to Roman Reigns anyway. And this match just fell flat because we weren't doing, once again, the obvious thing. I've said this in all my What Culture videos. I say it here too. The reason I have wrestling maths is because it simplifies things. 2 + 2 = 4 and 2 + 2 can equals potato. And if you do that equation and you do that sum and it comes out as potato, which is a vegetable, I don't think you should be equating that to wrestling booking. Roman should have just won and then see what happens. Well, actually what should have happened is Roman should have won and then we should have made him the tribal chief because all the signs were there. It's a different video. We'll shift over to WrestleMania 33 now, although I also may include WrestleMania 31 in this. And it's basically the poor run of Bray Wyatt matches at WrestleMania. In fact, I'm going to bring in a third one, which is when he took on John Cena. So Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt versus The Undertaker, and Bray Wyatt versus John Cena. He should have won one of these. Now, if he had beaten John Cena, who I believe was the first one, that may be wrong, maybe The Undertaker was first. But if he had won the first one when he was taking on a so-called legend, and they were bona fide legends, let's be fair now, I think then you can get to the other years, you can see where he's is at, who needs to win, what stories are we going to tell. But the fact he went to bat 3 times at WrestleMania against these people, like I said, that were at the tippity top, and he lost every single one, this is the reason that he had to become the Fiend. Now, look, fair play to Bray Wyatt. The fact he was able to make 2 characters, both of which WWE trampled on, is absolutely amazing. But it also did affect his gimmick, it affected his persona, and it affected the aura that he had, especially because in both guises, he was meant to be a scary guy. And if a scary, spooky, wookie guy can't get any victories, how on earth is anybody going to be able to connect to him in the way that you wanted to be connected? Let's look at the Undertaker, who literally looked at him from across the ring. Now, there is a caveat to this, because it was his first match after he had lost to Brock Lesnar, and WWE was never going to do that. But one of the reasons the Undertaker became the legendary figure that he was is because he had the WrestleMania streak, and that's because we went the other way with him. We found people that did have prominent names, and we went, Mark Calloway, the dead man, he's going to beat all of them. Whereas poor Bray, he had to go up with people that had caliber to them and just have his ass whipped. And after a while, you're like, listen, man, you talk a good game, but when push comes to shove, you can't deliver. That's why I always felt sorry for Bray Wyatt, and why I was always doubly impressed with him, because he just rode it, man. He did not care. He just kept injecting his creative juices. Man was one of a kind. And we may as well talk about WrestleMania 9 as well. I mean, do we talk about Yokozuna versus Bret Hart, or do we talk about Yokozuna versus Hulk Hogan? Let's just talk about that one. Like, we probably should have just had Bret Hart win this anyway, but I don't want to put any nastiness on Yokozuna's name. That guy is one of the all-time greats, and again, maybe someone we don't talk about enough. But even then, if Hulk Hogan, I mean, we never should have got to this point anyway. If Hulk Hogan is going to come out afterwards and say, I want to challenge you, although actually it's Yokes that challenges him, Yokozuna should have won, because then you have this amazing, strong heel champion that can dominate for a few more months, and then you can pick whoever the hell you want. It probably would have been a Bret Hart. It shouldn't have been a Hulk Hogan, because all the signs were there. The Hulkamania was hiding in the wrong direction. But I don't mind pulling a fast one every now and then and having your heel champion win at Mania, because again, if Yokozuna had crushed Bret Hart, salt in the eyes, and then Bonsai dropped Hulk Hogan and beaten him too, everyone would have been like, Yoko, man, we can't mess with Yokes. He's going to whip everybody's ass. But instead, Hulk Hogan won. Then we got to the King of the Ring. We had to switch it back because nobody wanted to see Hulk Hogan on top again. So yeah, I personally would have had just Bret Hart beat Yokozuna. But I also had no problem if Yokozuna beat both of them. But we didn't do that now, did we? If you haven't seen WrestleMania 9, trust Uncle Simon, which I'm never calling myself again. Don't do it. And we'll talk quickly about WrestleMania 27, Michael Cole versus Jerry Lawler. It's on the list that someone has sent me. I don't care. To be completely honest with you, this is the longest match in WrestleMania history, not literally but figuratively. And Stone Cold Steve Austin being the referee is totally nuts, but Michael Cole did win, probably because Vince McMahon thought it'd be hilarious if old school wrestling legend Jerry Lawler lost to Michael Cole. Jerry Lawler should have just won. It should have been over in 2 minutes, and then Austin should have stunned Michael Cole, and that should have been it. Now look, I don't want to take anything away from the heel version of Michael Cole. He did a grand job, but I never want my lead announcer to be a dickhead, because this is the guy I have to listen to throughout the show, especially Raw this 3 hours, and after a while it gets a little bit grating. But actually, I'll be honest with you, I don't care who wins this match. I'm eliminating from my brain, and I never want to talk about it again. Which brings us to WrestleMania 25, Triple H versus Randy Orton. Now, this has kind of gone down the history books, because they had an amazing build-up to this damn thing, where there were home invasions, and Randy Orton was taking out the McMahon family. And then we got to the match, and they locked up. It's like, this is meant to be a blood feud. Why on earth would you apply a wrestling hold? And Triple H wins the thing, and ultimately, he shouldn't have done. Now, you can easily come back and say, well, I can argue that, Simon, because Randy Orton went on to do just fine, and you're totally right. But I just think around about the time of WrestleMania 25, what we needed to do was cement ourselves with a top heel. Now, Randy Orton was always in that position, but if he had walked away with a victory against Triple H and still been the world champion, I think people would have just been shocked by it, because again, the story we were telling was a little bit brutal, it was a little bit walking the line, it was a little bit controversial. So sometimes, sure, it makes sense for the babyface to win, especially at WrestleMania. But Triple H didn't need it. He'd already entered the upper pantheons here. And Randy Orton was definitely heading in that direction. But I don't know, maybe it's just because the match wasn't fought in the way that I personally thought it should have done. So now I look back with a little bit of sort of grey goggles on. But I think that just would have given it an extra kick, and it probably would have been able to do something for Randy throughout the rest of that year. And again, once more, he did do this, but I don't think he did it in the way that he should have done. It's one of those occasions where we should have gone the other way. We totally did do it. And Triple H just won, and everyone's like, well, now what? Exactly, now what? We need something different. We're going to move on to a couple of streak matches now, which are both WrestleMania 29 and WrestleMania 30. I will let you debate WrestleMania 30 in the comments, because I think the Undertaker streak's dying is something that deserved its own video. I've always been an advocate for it because I do actually think that WWE rode all of that for the next 10 years. Brock Lesnar did become the final boss of the WWE, and I think without battering on that for like a year, which he and Paul Heyman did, you may not have the same magnitude or the same energy to be able to get away with it. Just my opinion. If we'd never stopped the streak, I wouldn't have minded either, but Brock Lesnar I do think was a worthy candidate. But the year before that, we did CM Punk versus The Undertaker. Now, once again, we're putting on hindsight goggles here. But if you knew, which they didn't because they made their mind up on the day, The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak was going to lose at WrestleMania 30, I would have let CM Punk do it at WrestleMania 29. The story had been great. The match was amazing. It was one of the best matches of the night. You can argue it was one of CM Punk's best performances ever. And if he had been the guy to beat the streak, and then we had sort of taken everything we had with Punk and maybe even done what we did do, but on a higher level, and put him properly in the main event, I think it would have changed the entire conversation around him. And also, here we go, big one, I don't think he leaves in 2014. Punk had also been the man for a year and a half before this, which is why he was a bit pissed off because he thought he deserved to be in the proper WrestleMania main event. But if he had been the guy to beat the streak, that's bigger than winning or losing a WrestleMania main event because you are going to be written into folklore. And I don't know, I mean, you can probably argue with everything that's gone on, maybe he shouldn't have been the guy, but it goes back to right place, right time. And I think you could have pulled the trigger on CM Punk being in that position, and he could have gloated about it for weeks, for months, for years, which is what Brock Lesnar did. And this is when I kind of be a little bit of a hypocrite because yes, Brock Lesnar would have always been an intimidating figure, but I still think the streak gave him something extra. But if you'd given that to Punk, you would have created a different beast entirely. WrestleMania 2000 is next on the cards or whatever. I get confused because people call it WrestleMania 2000, but it's actually what, WrestleMania 16, right? Why did we change the names? This is when we didn't have Stone Cold Steve Austin, so everyone freaked out and decided that we can't do Triple H versus The Rock. So we threw the Big Show and Mick Foley in there. I don't personally mind because Mick Foley always wanted to be in the main event of WrestleMania. But I do believe, and I could be wrong, but it was definitely one of the first times, not the first time, when the heel champion went, I've just won a WrestleMania, and that's how I'm sending you all home. Now, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions to this rule, but The Rock was in the match, right? And The Rock was going to win it in a month's time anyway. But if you had just lost Stone Cold Steve Austin, you're lucky enough to have Dwayne Johnson on your roster, you get to the WrestleMania main event, and he beats the big bag dastardly heel to get the win. Let's just jump across to WrestleMania 19 here too. This one was twice as bad for obvious reasons. It's why Booker T should have won as well. I don't like watching any of this. If you don't know, there's only one way to put it. It's the truth. The story is that Triple H and Ric Flair were going to be massively racist, and Booker T was going to have to take it, which I suppose could have been okay. I'm massively uncomfortable with it, but it could have been okay if the good guy then beats the bully's ass and takes his championship, because you can then tell the story, you shouldn't be like this. You should be nice to people. Otherwise, you're going to get your just desserts. But instead, Triple H hits the pedigree and leaves Booker T laying for about an hour. And then pins him. It's not funny. It's really bad. It's really, 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 really terrible. It just is. Ipso facto. I love Triple H, right? He's one of my heroes. I wouldn't have gone to the gym without him. He should not have won these two matches. And these days, look back and say no. Which is when we go back to WrestleMania 31 to finish off. I told you we'd be popping back here. Triple H versus Sting. Given what AEW have done with Steve Borden now, I kind of think WWE should be ashamed of themselves. And this doesn't even make any sense. Even Scott Hall and Kevin Nash said it doesn't make any sense. Because Sting spent a lot of his time in World Championship Wrestling feuding with the NWO Black and White. And here they just come out as the NWO Black and White. Hulk Hogan is involved. Sting never liked Hulk Hogan within the realms of the story. And then you've got D-Generation X2, and that's when we realized it was totally being pitched as WCW versus WWE, which Michael Cole talked about on commentary, or whoever was doing comms during that match. And because that's how it was sold, Vince McMahon clearly went, well, we can't have a WCW guy win, which is absolutely nonsense. This was WrestleMania 31. I can't remember when it happened, but at least 15 years after WCW had died, right? WCW was dead, maybe 10 years. No one was going to go, oh, Sting beat Triple H. We should bring back World Championship Wrestling. By that point, you had a whole legion of fans that probably didn't even know what WCW was. If Sting had won here, everything else we could have done, I think we probably would have got to the Undertaker match, depending on what goes on with his health. Of course, he breaks his neck or does whatever he does do to his neck. He injures it in that match with Seth Rollins. But Sting was such a character and he was so over and he had such an aura that he actually kind of just shook this off. But there was more dumb stuff to this because, of course, Triple H won by hitting him in the head with a sledgehammer. Then afterwards, they shake hand. And you can see This comes up all the time when legends are being interviewed on podcasts or whatever. And to a man, to a woman, they all say this should not have happened and WWE did not treat Sting right. And that's because WWE didn't see him as a WWE guy, even though fans don't actually care about that stuff. They just don't. I know there's some tribalistic stuff these days, but that's just some crazy people. There's no two ways about it. Triple H should not have won this match. It should have gone to Sting, but I still do totally believe this was a Vince McMahon call because he wanted to take one last kick at WCW, which is kind of ironic because the reason he was so mad at them is because there was a crack in the door which created this industry of competitiveness, and he vowed to never do it again. And what happened, 5-6 years after this? Well, it happened again when AEW was there, and who became a pivotal part of that? It was Sting. Sometimes karma will whoop your butt. So, of course, there'll be a bunch of other matches where the wrong guy did win. Let me know in the comments below, and hopefully we can do a part 2 of this. In fact, we will do that. Throw down like 15 in there, and I'll make sure I pull them out as well. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Click the video on the screen to continue your Simon Miller wrestling journey if that's what you want. You may just want to go eat a pizza. More power to you. Otherwise, it is GorillaMind.com/Simon. You can sign get 10% off. These are fitness supplements I use, which is why I'm happy to pimp them out, and I'm proud to be on the team. Patreon.com/Simon316. I'm in 316 on Instagram and Twitter. Simon J. Miller on TikTok. Simon Miller on Cameo. ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller, and the same for Sam's Athletics. If you would like to buy some merchandise, always appreciate getting that email. But whether we go live before or after WrestleMania 40, make sure you enjoy it. Keep enjoying wrestling because that's what it's there for, to entertain you and escape from all the problems in your life. See you soon.